Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're very welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Spring Webinar Series. Over the next 8 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be covering everything from maximising your slurry, getting the most out of your fertiliser, winter finishing, calf rearing, we'll be live from the lambing shed in Tullamore, grassland management and silage quality. But as we kick off into February, what else would you be talking about other than calving the cow and the care of the cow? I'm delighted to be joined tonight by Aidan Brennan, our dairy editor, Adam Woods, our suckler and beef editor, and our farm manager from our demonstration farm in Tullamore, Sean Diver. Along with the guys, we'll be joined by Donald Lynch, who's also our vet down on our farm in Tullamore. Make sure to get your questions into the lads, ladies and gentlemen, webinar@farmersjournal.ie or WhatsApp us on 086 836 6465. A shout out to our sponsors tonight, AXA Insurance and Chanelle Animal Health. First up, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to Aidan Brennan, and Aidan chats with Mark Keenan from the dairy team in Gurteen about what his plans are ahead of the calving season down on the college.
It's the last days of January, the sun is shining, slurry is spread, birds are singing and cows are about to calve, which can only mean one thing, that spring is around the corner. I'm here in Gurteen Ag College. We're going to meet the dairy team consisting of Mark Keenan, Dara Comerford and Dylan McGrath, and we're going to hear how they're going to plan for this busy spring period. Mark, if I can start with you first, can you tell us a little bit about the dairy herd here at Gurteen Ag College?
The herd was traditionally about 160 cows, split calf in spring, autumn. We're in expansion mode since 2015, and in 2018 all the herd went to spring calving. They're a pedigree Holstein black and white herd, and we are chasing EBI really on the herd. The herd average is 150 at the moment.
In terms of production, Mark, what did you do last year and how many kilos of meal were they fed?
So we sold just short of 450 kilos of milk solids last year, on just over 1 ton of meal per cow. Bit over stock. We're about 2.98 stocking rate on the overall platform.
Fairly highly stocked then.
Yeah.
In terms of the calving date, so you're all spring calving now. When are they due to calve?
So our first cow is due the 1st of February, and we've 4 on the ground as it is at the moment.
And the last couple of days of January, so you're a bit ahead of the posse, which is expected.
Yeah, we've a pretty busy spring. We've 136 due in the first 3 weeks and 204 due by Paddy's Day.
Yeah. So we're here with the dry cows at the moment. What kind of diet are they on at the minute, and what's the plan going forward?
So this bunch here are within 6 weeks of calving. So these are on silage, a kilo of straw, a kilo of meal made up of half a kilo of soya and a half kilo of barley and minerals, and 3 kilos of beet. And they go on that for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then the cows are far off or just on silage and straw at the moment.
And Mark, is there a reason for the extra bit of the concentrate for the last 6 weeks? You know, a lot of farmers just keep them on silage alone.
I suppose condition score in the herd, we were a bit behind at dry off. I think nearly over 90% of the herd was below 3.25 at dry off. So October is a hard month on them. So we kind of dried them off according to calving date and body condition score. Everything was dried off the 21st December, and we're trying to build that up. But the main reason for the meal is to improve the quality of the beastons and the colostrum, so that we've good quality colostrum for the calves. We find it works. We're all beastons is refractometer tested before we pool it and stuff like that.
Yeah. In fairness, the condition score, we just went through it earlier on, the condition score of the cows now is good. They want to be as good as they are, at the same time, you'd have to say, you know. So.
Yeah, they've just, I suppose really only in the last 3 weeks we've seen them starting to shine up a nice bit, and it was about time they would, so I said they're going to hit the ground fairly running this year.
So what's the plan then? They're going to stay, the dry cows are going to stay in the shed until roughly the point of calving, and then go across to the
so we have a batch shed for a straw shed, and we'll draft out 3 times a week into that. So then what generally happens, we keep the heifers in a smaller area in the cubicles, and we draft out of that. We look into that every day. We have the group close ones together. So what we do then at night time is basically we pull out any cows that are very close to calf and put them into individual pens, and then during the night there's a few spare pens of any in the batch ones calf we can bring into that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at the calving facility. So.
Yeah.
Okay, Aidan, thanks for that. Really impressive setup down there. Busy period ahead. Aidan, what tips would you give a farmer now, like the guys down in Gurteen, that's heading into a very busy and intensive 3-week period? How can they prepare for that, or what steps can they take to make that as manageable as possible?
Yeah, well, sure. I suppose, look, the big advantage of Gurteen, Justin, is that they've loads of help. In fairness, like they've a good team of farm staff, and they've obviously got loads of students around as well. So Gurteen is not your typical dairy farm, which needs to be recognised and said. But for the ordinary farmer listening in, it's look, there's two things: there's sleep and food for energy. For yourself, now I'm talking about, like, because the worst thing that could happen is to get hangry, which is where you're hungry and angry at the same time. And look, it's inevitable, it's going to happen at some point. A lot of farmers will work over the next couple of weeks on adrenaline, and the next 3 weeks are generally the busiest 3 weeks, and you get over them. Really, the crunch time comes kind of in March, where you've had the 3 or 4 weeks now of hectic calving. March is a month of many problems, as farmers will be well aware. The weather can be variable. You've more or less doubled the number of stock you have to look after, because you have an awful lot of cows calved, and you have all these calves to look after as well. And diseases kind of creep in there. So really, I'd say not to get too burnt out over the next couple of weeks. Sleep well, eat well. It's easier to say sleep. It's easy for me to say sleep well, but you need to catch your naps at some point, whether that's go for an hour or two during the day, if possible, or else get the help in. Obviously, like, that's a huge thing, but difficult for those that are milking, maybe owner operators, that maybe don't have full-time help. It's hard to get staff, but you need to prioritize jobs in that case. So I'd say prioritize jobs, eat well, and sleep as best as you can. That's my advice for the next few weeks.
But Aidan, staff can come in many different factions, like getting the contractor in to spread the fertilizer, getting the contractor in to spread the slurry, not trying to do everything yourself. If you're going to go at calving, you're going to go at calving and let somebody else do some of the other jobs around the farm.
Yeah, definitely. Like, in fairness, a lot of dairy farmers now have taken that on board. Contractors are a lot busier on dairy farms. And even I was down on a farm in Cork the other day. It's in the paper tomorrow, and he's planning to get a contractor in for the next 3 weeks just to feed silage to the cows. So that's one less job that he doesn't have to focus on. So we've lots of little examples like that, where you can, get in outside help. As you say, it mightn't necessarily be a labour unit on your own farm, but it's help coming in a different guise, as you say.
I think it's important the farmer realizes that he's the most valuable asset on his farm, if not at all stages during the year, but certainly during the calving period. Aidan, I noticed the guys feeding meal during the dry period.
Yeah, that's what Gurteen are doing. Look, I mean, I question mark on it. Is there need for it? Now, in fairness, like we mentioned the body condition score, and that's the reason, they're feeding that. I think it's a kilo of meal, or it's carrying the mineral. It's adding, there's a bit of soy in it as well, I think. Mark said it's for colostrum quality. Now, look, I mean, my personal opinion is that it's probably not necessary if the silage quality is decent. It's more of an issue. My understanding is on you added my comments on it, but a lot of the beef farmer silage might be poor quality in terms of the crude protein level in it, whereas dairy silage, it's generally better quality. You're talking 11, 12, 13% crude protein, and generally that shouldn't be a problem for colostrum quality. But look, I mean, Mark's experience is different. He didn't feed it for a few years ago. Colostrum quality was poor. Remember, now he is testing his colostrum. He mentioned the refractometer, so he has more information on the silage on the quality of the colostrum in Gurteen than I have. So look, I mean, and colostrum is golden, as Donald, I'm sure we'll talk about later on. So it's if that's what they're doing, that's their plan is. I don't think it's necessary myself. But then again, each farm is different.
Adam, the opening salvo's been fired. You beef men don't know how to make good quality silage, and that's why you have to feed soya down the farm in Tullamore.
I'm not going to rise to that bait.
Not this early in the night, yeah. Anyway, Adam. Not this early.
No, I suppose we've been doing the Tullamore, and look at Sean can comment as well. But you'd be slow to move away from it, to be honest. The strategy in Tullamore, let it be right or wrong, has been that first cut silage is generally good quality. It's good in protein, and that goes into our weanlings. And second cut silage, we let that grow on, and that goes into our suckler cows. It's generally a little bit lower in quality and generally lower in protein. So our protein in our silage is generally maybe around the 10, maybe a little bit lower. So we're getting a good kick out of the soya there. It's not for a long time, maybe 2 weeks. I think he even reduced it maybe back a wee bit this year as opposed to last year. And yeah, cows calving down really good colostrum. We can't take that chance. And I suppose if we go looking for science, Aidan is actually right. And I know David Wright has opinions on this as well in the north in terms of looking for science on this. There is no science on this. And in terms of research saying not that much difference. But still on the ground, we're slow to go away from it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, I'm going to pause our focus on the calving of the cow, because we have, believe it or not, another Brexit crisis just unfolding in Northern Ireland as we have come on air. And I've just made contact with our market specialist and Brexit specialist, Phelim O'Neill, to tell us, Phelim, jump in here, tell us what's happening up north. What is, in relation to Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol, what's developing tonight?
Well, Justin, this evening, basically, the minister in the north here, Edwin Poots, would have instructed his staff to stop all checks at the ports on goods coming in from Britain. Two ports in Northern Ireland in particular that would be active, Belfast and Larne. This was done last year and subsequently reversed on instruction from Westminster. And you introduced the piece there, Justin, with the phrase another Brexit crisis. And that's really what it is. You know, when people's eyes tend to glaze over now when we bring up the subject of Brexit, it's the fastest way to empty a room that you'll get. And the reason for that is we're 6 years into this debate now, and as of yet, Brexit hasn't really impacted on Irish farmers. Even the checks that are supposed to come in at the start of the year there, Ireland's been excluded from them until as long as the talks process continue. But, you know, it's worth keeping in mind just where this could lead to if all does go wrong. And it's almost like a bit of saber rattling anywhere on any issue. The days that the saber gets drawn from the scabbard and it really takes effect is when we would feel it. And that's something that we have covered on right the way throughout the journal, you know, the what if scenario. And the what if scenario quite simply is if the EU and the UK cannot come to an arrangement in terms of managing the Northern Ireland Protocol, that border, if you like, that is talked about now in the Irish Sea between Belfast, between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, then that has the potential to basically wreck the whole trade and cooperation agreement that was agreed on Christmas Eve 2020.
Just let's go back to junior infants here for a lot of our listeners that might not be as close to Brexit as you are and maybe I, but let's just, what has happened here tonight is that effectively the Irish Sea was a border between Europe and Britain. As Britain goes and does its own product or does its own international trade deals, that border in the Irish Sea was basically what protected the integrity of the European Union. If Edmund Poots no longer has decided now no longer to put those checks, product from third countries that could come into Britain could effectively then come into Northern Ireland, and because there's no border between North and South, end up in Southern Ireland and end up into Europe. So Britain could become the landing zone. What is the alternative? What do you see happening? Are we going to see Ireland, southern ports in Ireland, actually become the border between Britain and Europe? Is that a possibility?
We're going into the whole hypothesis at this stage, Justin. You know, first and foremost, what could happen is that the EU decides, right, you've thrown the gates open here as an act of defiance. As far as we're concerned, the Northern Ireland Protocol was the first thing that was agreed before any trade and cooperation agreement. It was a condition of making that agreement. If that condition is violated and shattered, then it is quite conceivable the EU would say, look, this isn't working, and then we'll go into a full border situation, a full breakdown. Don't think that will happen, but that is
tariffs,
the ultimate
would you go into tariffs
and tariffs, well? Yes. Oh no, if you have a complete breakdown, that's what you have. At the minute, like in terms of trade from Britain into the EU, the reality is, and this is why there's checks in Belfast, the reality is that has to get all of the veterinary certification, inspection, etc., which adds cost, administrative cost, and it adds time delays. That's the bare minimum, and that's with the agreement. If there's no agreement, you go into tariffs. And again, we've done a piece of work on this at the time. If Ireland was a country that had the second highest, largest tariff in the EU, 27, that's quite simply because agriculture products, beef in particular, carry a tariff of €3.03 per kilo, equivalent in sterling. UK, I think it was 250 in sterling that they identified. That's what you'd be carrying, and that's what would essentially scupper the Irish beef exports to England if we got into that nightmare scenario.
So that's the Armageddon.
Get there, but that is the Armageddon.
What is the logical compromise?
Look, the logical compromise is that the EU and UK will find a fudge that will allow some sort of controlled, limited inspections that everyone can learn to live with. And don't forget the amount of politicking that's involved here as well, just in the timing of this. Like back before Christmas, the whole debate was Article 16. We're leading up to elections here in the north now at the start of May. So political parties are staking out their territory. They are doing the tough stuff. And I think once an election's out of the way, then the negotiations get back again. You know, we've been at crises before in this, they used to be one a month, and we can only hope that it's the same again, because the alternative for farmers on the island of Ireland, either side of that border, is just too horrible to contemplate.
Yeah. So, Phil, basically what happened, does anything change tomorrow morning in terms of trade?
Nothing will change tomorrow morning because you won't do anything tomorrow. There will be issues, there'll be talks, there'll be discussions, there can be suspensions. It's just a case of more talks. But what this action does, it shows that just how fragile that arrangement, if you like, that was put in place that allows Northern Ireland to have a foot in both camps, be part of the UK single market, be part of the EU single market. That's something that is quite fragile, needs management. And if the spirit's not there to manage it, then it's very difficult to see what kind of a solution you get to. And then do you lead, for example, in terms of scenarios that we talk about, like we talked about the worst case, the Armageddon one there, is there lesser scenarios then? Do they go back to looking and see, is there some way that they can have a very light touch border at the ports in Northern Ireland for goods coming from Britain, and maybe have more of an administrative type border in terms of business to business transactions on the island of Ireland? Or indeed, is it conceivable that the UK or that the EU might say, look, to the Republic of Ireland, look, you operate within that single market, and we'll have some sort of a light touch arrangement to go into effect at the Irish ports. Now, that would not be politically very tolerable, and it would be the option of a last resort or something beyond that. But those are all the options and the scenarios that could arise. But look, this debate's been going on now, 2016. It's coming up to the 6th anniversary of that referendum, and it has been fudged and blurred up until now with a regular crisis. It's been a while since we'd won. I suppose you might, if you're really cynical about this, say another one was due.
Phil, I know you like to toast your toes in front of the fire after 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night, so we'll let you get back to it, and no doubt you'll keep us up to date on farmersjournal.ie tomorrow.
Yeah,
Phil,
we'll be putting something on the website on this tomorrow. Just
get back to the fire there, Phil, and we'll keep the show on the road. Go on, talk to you later, Philip. Thank you for coming in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Aidan is going to take us back to Gurteen, and what will he be looking at? He'll be going to inside the calving shed.
Dara, you're in charge of calving here at Gurteen Ag College. Just explain a little bit about where we are at the moment.
Yeah, so at the minute we're in the calving pens. There's 8 pens here. The heifers typically stay in here. There's a communal calving area then across the way for the cows. We'd comfortably fit 15 cows over there. The heifers tend to stay here because it's closer to the cubicle shed, and we can keep a better eye on them here.
And they're all individual pens here, I suppose,
all
as well,
individual
which probably
pens,
helps.
and there's 3 individual pens over in the communal area.
Okay, so how soon would the heifers tend to come in here to calve, or even the cows over in the other area?
So every day we check the heifers and cows, obviously checking their pin bones and seeing how well they're sprung up. We bring the heifers in here, then they typically maybe spend 1 or 2 days in here, but they're safe in here, then we're able to keep an eye on them. And then we bring the cows over on the same kind of criteria.
Okay. Obviously, look, you're only getting going at calving. You have a few calved already. There's a heifer calving there behind you. How soon would you intervene the likes of the situation here where the heifer has, the legs out?
Yeah, so typically after the first half an hour of a heifer starting to calve, so that's the water bag out, we'd like to see them making some good progress. If they haven't, we'd go in, check out what's going on. We'd have a feel around. We'd like to feel 2 front feet, so that's their 2 hooves facing downwards, and a nose. That way we know the calf is presenting well. In regards to the cows, after
and you'd leave her alone. You'd leave her alone in that case. Then that she's okay, she's presenting fine. Let her do her own business.
Yeah, we'd leave her alone, and it's the same with the cows after the first hour. If they haven't made any progress at that stage, then we'd intervene, maybe with the jack, and if necessary, then the vet.
Yeah, check the presenting of the heifer. Yeah. In terms of, we were just talking about calving difficulty. Are you doing anything special to prevent calving difficulty issues?
Yeah, so with the heifers, we typically choose bulls that have less than 6% calving difficulty. With the cows, 4 to 6%. We'd like to choose bulls that have a good reliability and a good gestational period.
And I see the heifers or the cows that are here, they're all in good body condition score, which is important too in terms of not being over fat.
Exactly.
So they can actually calve easily enough. Generally, obviously, look, we're in a busy farm. There's a lot of students around. There's a lot of staff here. A lot of things going on, building work, etc. How do you manage safety at calving?
So we're lucky in the sense that there's nearly always 2 people here during calving. People with experience are allowed in to calve cows if necessary. There's restraining facilities here for the heifers or cows if necessary also. No high-vis vests, we don't want to be spooking the animals. And you'd never ever turn your back on a freshly calved heifer or cow.
Yeah, that's all good advice. Finally, Dara, how long are the calves staying with the cows before they move back to the calf shed?
So the calf typically stays with the heifer or the cow until it's licked dry and it's had its 3 litres of colostrum. Then it'll go over to the calf shed.
Okay, well let's go over and take a look at the calf shed. So.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks for that, Aidan. Aidan, a lot of individual calving pens, and I see some of the coverage in the journal, a lot of guys moving towards, I suppose, communal pens, larger sheds. Hell of a lot of work with those individual pens, is there not?
There is, Justin, yeah, but at the same time, like, it's the gold standard. I'm sure Donald might talk about it later. Like, individual pens are the gold standard in terms of animal, I suppose, in terms of care of the cow and care of the calf and all the rest, because there's no cross mothering. It's easier to handle the cow and all the rest. But you're right, like, there is a lot more work involved, because number one, the person, the farmer or whoever's working in the farm has to be there to put that cow into that individual pen, before she calves. Whereas if you've a communal area, you can throw in, as many cows as the shed can comfortably hold, and let them do their own business. Oftentimes, moving cows quite close to calving is probably the worst thing you can do, because it upsets the calving rhythm, and the cow is moved to a different environment, and she's to get adjusted to all that as well. And sometimes then she might stop calving. I was on a farm in the UK last autumn, and they actually keep the cows on the cubicle shed for as long as possible until the legs are out, and only then they move them. I know standards are very high in that farm. It's a high yielding herd, so different people have different priorities on it. But look, for the likes of Gurteen, I can't say it's wrong, but for a farmer working on his or her own, I would say a communal area is probably the way to go.
And why move? Why not leave the heifers longer?
Yeah, so half an hour is what Dara said there in the video. Look, generally, I would say the cows should probably be getting a little bit longer. Sorry, the heifers should be getting a little bit longer than the cow, because they need more. They're going to be a little bit slower to open. But look, I mean, there's no point in rushing in, Justin. Like, the worst thing you can do from a dairy farmer's point of view is rush in, or any farmer point of view, rush in and start forcing the calf to come too early, whether that's with a jack or ropes or whatever else. The cow needs to be fully open before you're going to go handling her. And the Gurteen policy is to leave the cow do her own thing. And if she's in trouble, then you go in and intervene. And we saw that in the video when we were there the other day. There was that heifer was calving, and she wasn't making any progress for the length of time that we were there doing the video. So they went in, and look, it was a big bull calf, and she needed a bit of a hand. So it's just being sensible, I would say, is kind of the key thing there.
Aidan, Adam Woods always goes out about you guys producing beef animals that aren't suitable for his men to carry through the beef. All about short gestation and easy calving. How important is that in terms of? I've often heard it said you'll do more for the cow in terms of when you're inseminator than you'll ever do with the calving jack. What advice would you give guys, and how is it possible to please Adam and to please the dairy farmer in terms of that just short gestation and easy calving?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's a balance, I suppose, Justin. And in fairness, for probably the last 10 years, that balance has been going the wrong direction in terms of what Adam wants and what the beef farmer wants who's buying those calves. So now it's about changing the direction of that. In fairness, the DBI, the Dairy Beef Index, is a step in the right direction, I would say. So you're looking at, it's a balance in terms of you're going to use bulls and cows that have better beef merit, but also have relatively short gestation lengths and are easy calving. Look, there's no point in having a very big dead calf. So we want to avoid that. We don't, nor a cow that's down and won't get up. So it's about the balance. I'd say, in fairness, I think dairy farmers are taking this on board. There's an awful lot more beef bulls being used in terms of AI beef bulls being used on dairy farms, and I think that's a trend we're going to see continue. So look, it's going to get there, but we need more data on it. We need more farmers and using these test bulls, and we need more recording on calving difficulties and gestation lengths. We have the gestation lengths, but calving difficulty recording is probably poor enough.
Adam, you were giving out, I see in the paper, was it last week, about not getting enough data when buying these cows?
Yeah, I guess look, it's a positive move. Cork Marts are going to look to put the damn breed up on the board. I guess speaking to a lot of farmers out there in terms of when they maybe purchase a calf and they find that it's a Jersey cross cow that calf is out of, they're maybe not that pleased in terms of the genetics in that calf. And look, I suppose the elephant in the room is the registration of those calves in terms of sire registration. And look, we have to move to DNA. I know we're not here to talk tonight about that, but really we can talk about DBI and we can talk about CBVs, we can talk about everything and anything. But before we start DNA registering calves, we're really going nowhere.
Okay, guys, I have a few questions in here for you, Adam. I have one from Gary and Leitrim. We'll stay with you there. Don't be going anywhere because Gary's given out about you. In fairness, he starts off with a compliment. It really is a case of a pat in the back and a kick in the arse being 6 inches apart. Firstly, I always watch your webinars and thoroughly enjoy them. But my pet hate, Adam, is that every time you have a session on calving the cow, you talk about feeding soya. I don't follow feeding closely, but I'm thinking soya is €500 a tonne to the farmer here in Leitrim in 25 kilo bags. A cow producing 20 litres of milk doesn't need soya, but a suckler cow producing 5 to 8 litres of milk does.
Yeah, well, right. I guess, look, maybe we do need to go to Choggers and ask them what the research says. As I said, we've been doing it on Tullamore. We're very slow to go away from it. It's costing us about, I'd say, €9 or €10 a cow on Tullamore. In terms of, that's what the cost is to that cow, and we see that as a small cost in terms of ensuring that colostrum is there. As I said, we're slow to go away from a protein is low in the silage, and we know the protein in the diet is important for good colostrum production, and the risks of, I suppose, going away from that. And maybe Donald will touch on this later, and look, you can bring in Sean there as well. But I'll give an undertaking to Gary that we'll go and find the research, and we'll have it in the paper in the next few weeks.
All right, we'll hold them to that. I've heard loads of lads feeding post-calving recovery drinks. Is there any merit to these post-calving recovery drinks? Donald, do you want to cast any words of wisdom on that one?
I suppose certainly that's very topical at the moment. We're seeing
is it a Red Bull or something, Donald, or what?
Yeah, I suppose you couldn't nearly liken it to that. But remember, after the cow was calved, she's used up a lot of energy and a lot of minerals associated around calving time. So this time of the year, like, we're only getting going with our spring and off fleet. Further south, they'd be well started, but we're only getting going and we're seeing an awful lot of milk fever. And for example, some of these energy drinks or mineral drinks that are given to cows are very useful to prevent the cow developing clinical milk fever or some of the subclinical sides of it. So I would say, yeah, they definitely have a place. But as with a lot of things, and even a lot of things that have been talked here tonight, not everything is right on every farm.
That's good.
So,
yeah.
Lots of things, and even what Dara and Aidan were discussing there in relation to calving cows and the way they manage things, and Aidan referred to it, is not going to work on another farm where there maybe isn't as much help. But also some of the things that you might have to do on a farm that has certain disease issues, you don't have to do on another farm. Or depending on the type of quality silage, you might have to feed a different type of feed or more soya, as you've already talked about. So I would say everything you have to look at independently. They certainly do have a place, as do boluses in relation to minerals, but I would say they're not something that are essential on every farm.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go back to Gurteen and take our final trip to Gurteen. As Aidan said, he's gone off to look at the calving sheds.
Okay, Dylan, you're in charge of calf rearing here at Gurteen Ag College. We heard from Dara earlier on that calves come over to the calf shed a few hours after birth. What's the first thing you do when they come here?
So when the calves come over to the shed, they go into the individual crates and they stay there for 4 days.
Okay, and what about colostrum feeding, or is that done here or is it done over with the cow?
The calves are fed colostrum within the first hour when they're with the cow, and then they come over to these pens.
What's the rate of colostrum, Dara, and where is it stored and how is it heated? Just explain a little bit about that.
So they get 3 litres within the first hour. It's stored, so we keep some fresh up in the fridge. They get that, and then if that's not used within 10 or 12 hours, we freeze that in the freezer. If we
bags or how? What's
in colostrum bags?
Yeah.
And then if we need to thaw it out, we bring it down here and we thaw it out in warm water. We don't thaw it out in hot water because that'll only kill the good bacteria or the microorganisms in the milk.
Yeah. That colostrum is pooled, or is it from the individual cow given to the individual dammed?
Colostrum.
Okay. Yeah, and you've no issues with Jonas in the farm, so
No.
it's not a problem for you.
No.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. How long do the calves stay in these pens before they move out to the next pen?
So they stay in these individual pens for 4 days.
And then they move to how many calves will go into each pen at a time?
So we have pens of 8. So when we see that the calves are strong enough and drinking well enough, we move them into pens of 8, or else we have a few pens of 12.
Are the calves on milk replacer or whole milk?
The heifer calves, so every calf stays on whole milk until they're 7 days old. Then the heifer calves are transferred onto milk replacer. The bull calves are on whole milk. Although this year we're thinking maybe of putting the bull calves onto milk replacer as well, depending on the milk price.
Okay. But the milk that the bull calves are generally getting it's waste milk from the cows that can't go to the co-op.
Yeah.
How many litres of milk replacer or milk are they getting?
3 litres each feed, so that's 6 litres.
Twice a day?
Yeah.
Do you ever do once a day feeding, or is it always twice a day?
No, it's always twice a day.
Okay. In terms of extra stuff like water, access to meal, when do they start getting introduced to that?
So when they're moved over to their pens of 8 or pens of 12, there's fresh water in the pens, and they have access to meal from the day that they go over, which is an 18% protein ration.
Is that a crunch or is it a pellet or crunch? Yeah. Okay, good. Bedding wise then, I see, some of the beds are in straw already. Is that what you use the whole time?
We use all straw, yeah.
And how often is it changed or replaced?
They're bedded quite often, and we do the kneel test, so if our knees are wet, it's time to clean them out and put in new bedding.
Yeah, good. Ventilation wise, this shed is obviously, it's an old round roof shed.
Yeah.
It's been modified for a calf shed. What's the ventilation like here, we'd say, when shed is full and and things are busy?
It can get quite stuffy when it's peak, say March time, when you have a lot of calves, it can. So, but the sheets above us are raised up, so it's not too bad.
Yeah. Finally now, Dylan, a sick calf, something no farmer wants to see, but it does happen. What's the protocol here for dealing with a sick calf?
Any calves that we have sick, we isolate them into an individual pen. If it's scour or anything like that, they still get their milk, and then a few hours later, then we'd hit them with electrolytes and maybe an infrared bulb or a jacket, depending on what they require.
Very good. Listen, Dylan, best of luck for the season ahead, and I hope you don't get any sick calves.
Thanks very much.
So Aidan, having spent time down in Gurteen, what's your take-home message, or what's your key points for farmers?
Sure, the first one has to be colostrum. That's the key. Like the calf will survive an awful lot of hardship if it has enough colostrum, and it's about making sure that it gets sufficient quantity of the right quality stuff early enough in its life is the key. Obviously, then after that, it's hygiene. Gurteen is spotless, absolutely spotless, and I'm sure if we did any day of the week and any month of the year during the calving season, it will be equally as clean. But that's key. And Dylan spoke about the kneel test there in terms of the bedding. So he'll kneel down in the bed, and if his knee is wet when he stands up again, it's time to change the bed. There's a saying, a good bed is half the rearing. Plenty of straw. Straw is expensive, but God, you wouldn't want to skimp on it too much, because it'll save a lot of problems if the calf is.
Have you seen any other bedding alternatives, Adam or Sean, if you want to come in there? Because straw is expensive and you get very little time out of it. It gets wet at all. Now I know some people throw it out and then put it back in again into maybe deeper bedded sheds, but is there any alternatives out there?
Sean, we moved it. You moved to sawdust there in the big pens in Tullamore. How is that going?
Yeah, look, before in the last few years, we have been using peat underneath the cows with straw on top for calving. But, I suppose looking at our carbon footprint and trying to be more sustainable, we said we'd have to move away from peat. So I looked at sawdust, and we decided to put sawdust in the sort of communal calving area, where cows are lying off before they calve. And we're putting straw on top of that. And I'm actually quite impressed with the sawdust. I was skeptical enough of before we started out. I thought, it would get into, quite mushy very soon, but I'm quite impressed with it now. It's staying very dry underneath. The top layer is, I suppose, getting damp. It's still great soakage underneath. And my thoughts would be, after a week or two, maybe go in there with the loader and maybe turn up the dry sawdust underneath again. And go.
Is it actually sawdust, Sean, or is it wood chip?
No, it's sawdust. And I looked at wood chip as well. And I suppose just talking to the fellow that's supplying it, he says that he has been supplying sawdust to some farmers that have moved away from peat, and he says that they're returning back and coming back. And I suppose it makes sense that the sawdust is much drier, it's finer, it's you could almost you could almost compare it to the texture of peat, and it's a lot drier to the hand and touch. So there seems to be more soakage in the sawdust than there would be in wood chip. And I'm quite impressed with Ireland.
Guys, I'm going to touch on the old conundrum of spraying the navel or not.
Oh, we're spraying. Well, look, I'm talking for Sean. We're spraying on Tullamore and on Donald's advice. Actually, we're spraying down there. We're going in with chlorhexidine, and I'm not too sure what Donald says on that, but we are spraying.
Aidan, sorry, Donald, go ahead.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Like Adam says, chlorhexidine is recognised as the best and given the best results on it, and I do think it's absolutely important to be doing it. Like, it makes sense. It dries up the navel and stops bacteria going in, as well as disinfecting and killing any bacteria that might be there. Look, sometimes there's difficulties getting chlorhexidine. Iodine is certainly very good as well. But the one thing you would want to remember is it's only a part of the battle. If you have, like Aidan referred to, if you don't have colostrum right, all the navel dipping in the world won't stop the problems associated with dirty navels or joint tail, for example.
Guys, a question in here: where can I buy a refractometer? How much, and what exactly is the merit?
Donald might have the best answer for that.
Yeah, refractometers are very cheap. You could get them on eBay, or certainly in our practice, like if a client of mine came to me, I could certainly source one from. They're very cheap, like a number of euros. I can't tell you exactly what. The idea.
We're not going to tie you to it now, Donald. They can what they call it.
I actually ordered a refractometer yesterday, and it was 50 euro delivered here. So coming in the post.
Small money.
What's the benefit, Donald?
So the idea is that you put the drop of milk on it, and you can see, you read off a scale that tells you where colostrum is very good, not so good, or poor. I'm not going to say it's an exact science. It gives you a guideline, but like, it's worth doing. But again, don't depend on it. Like, if you're not getting problems, I don't think there's much need to change, or just get your vet to check a couple of colostrum samples. But certainly, if you are getting problems with disease, calf scour, or pneumonia on farm, it then does become hugely important, and you would be checking, and you'd also be taking samples from cows to make sure that they are getting protection when the colostrum goes into them as well, because you can have good colostrum, but if the calf is stressed and not taking the antibodies out of that colostrum into his blood, well, then he's going to struggle as well.
Okay, guys, remember to get your questions into us 086 836 6465, or email us on webinar@farmersjournal.ie. Aidan, thanks for that, and thanks for a fascinating tour of Gurteen College, and thanks to all the guys in Gurteen for their support and opening up the farm. Never easy to do. So next up, we're going to take a spin up the road from Gurteen, and we're going to go up to our own beef and suckler and sheep demonstration farm, where Adam Woods chats to Sean about how he gets ready for calving. But before we do that, we're going to play a short message from one of our partners tonight for this webinar, Chanelle Animal Health.
So today we're going to dispel a few myths on coccidiosis. The first one is that it's a species-specific disease. What does that mean? It means that animals like birds cannot transmit coccidiosis to animals like calves. Even species as closely related as sheep and goats will not transmit coccidiosis to one another. The next thing to say about coccidiosis is that the microorganisms that cause it are going to be absolutely everywhere in the animal's environment. So at some point in time, exposure is going to be inevitable. The problem is when that exposure happens in young animals that have not yet developed immunity to the disease. Next problem with coccidiosis, it's largely a subclinical disease, or asymptomatic. So only about 1 in 25 animals infected with a high burden of coccidia is going to display those clinical symptoms that we associate with coccidiosis, so that bloody scour, that straining, okay? So in a group of 25, you're going to have one animal skittering and scouring, the other 24 are going to look fine, but they're going to be losing performance. And the research will say that loss in performance is around about 19%, so definitely not to be sniffed at.
Okay, Sean, we're here on the calving shed in Tullamore Farm. Last days of January, you have 2 cows calved here behind us. I suppose, take us back. We've talked to Donal about, I suppose, you know, the technical aspects of preparing for calving and the calving process. But I suppose we're 3 or 4 years calving now on Tullamore Farm here. What's working on this farm and what's not? And tell us, I suppose, take us through from maybe the cows were housed in November as to what has happened those each month, that group of cows that you have.
Yeah, so I suppose preparation for calving really started maybe, you know, around last October when we started weaning calves and putting cows into the house, because then we would have been focusing on the body condition of the cows. Over fat cows needed to be pulled back. Thinner cows needed to be put on to, you know, a higher plane of nutrition and brought up a score or two. So we adjusted the body condition right up to the run up to Christmas, and you know, then we repenned all the cows according to calving dates. And then we'll be turning our attention sort of to the pre-calving diet then for those cows that are coming close to calving, and also the cows that are closest to calving will have to get their scour vaccines as well, which seems to be, you know, an important vaccine here, because we've had little or no problems really on this farm with scour since we've really started the project, and you know, the vaccine seems to be helping out there.
So it's costing close to €1,000 on this farm. Would you reckon that's money well spent on this farm?
Yeah, look, it's a tenner a cow, you know, and you're talking 90 to 100 cows in around €1,000, but if we start losing calves here, or maybe get up in the middle of the night to give lactates to calves not thriving, you know, €1,000 will be small money when calves start dying, and we don't want that.
What did you do? We'll say you mentioned there about the cows with low body condition score and the cows with high body condition score. Just tell us very quickly what you done with those 2 groups of cows and just how you managed them during the couple of months.
Yeah, pretty simple. We just basically cows that were in good condition or over fat were put all in the one pen together, or a couple of pens, and they were given maybe the poorer quality silage, maybe stuff off the top of the pit, or you know, the poorer quality second cut silage, just to maintain them. Yeah. Cows that were thinner, they were offered better quality stuff, be it baled silage or first cut.
So you have a group of cows. We're up now onto the month of January. You have a group of cows here in front of us that have sort of moved off slats and they're on sawdust here in front of us. And then you have 3 or 4 calving pens here behind us. Tell us about the process, I suppose, involving the camera as well. Or do you do a daily check here in terms of walking through those animals, or what happens?
Yeah, so I mean, you would walk through all the cows every day, but this pen here now where we are, this is the cows that are closest to calving, so we'll be keeping the closest eye on these. We'll be checking these 2 or 3 times a day. They've access to slats, they eat on the slats, and then they lie back on the sawdust and straw here behind us. And you know, as calving ramps up, we'll divide the shed up the middle, and we'll be pulling off the cows that are really springing down and leave them to one side, where we can keep an eye under them all the time, where they can't get back to the slats, you know, because we have the camera there and we can swing it around whenever we want.
It's almost all AI here, so you have fairly accurate dates on all these cows. You have a fairly accurate scanning date, so you know what to pull out into this large calving pen here.
Yeah, the AI really makes it simpler around calving time, because I suppose, look, you have your AI docket, you know exactly when the cow is due, and if that's matching up with the scan date, well, there you go.
In terms of percentage of cows that you have to assist, I guess ideally a cow will calve out in that communal area and then you move her across to this individual pen for a few days, but what's the percentage there, or what was the percentage last year in terms of having to go in to assist? What were you looking at?
Yeah, like we're usually, you know, running around 80% of the cows calve unassisted, so, you know, assisting 20%, and I'd say within that 20% you could probably class 10% of them maybe calves that really had to be assisted. Others could be just cows that maybe, you know, you might come over here in the morning and you're just not sure maybe how long a cow is calving, or, you know, you just put your hand in and help her along.
And in terms of making that decision, what do you use here in terms of on the farm? If a cow is first water bag out, are you saying 1 hour, are you saying 2 hours, are you saying 3 hours, or what's important for you in terms of when do you make that decision to go in and handle and see what's going on?
Yeah, like I suppose it's more to do with maybe the behaviour of the cow after she puts out the first water bag. You know, if she's lying down, forcing, and she's making good progress to try and get the calf up and get him out, then you'd be trying to tend to say to yourself then, you know, she's making good progress, we'll leave her alone. But if she's going around, maybe not settling down to push, or not lying down, and she's really uneasy, unsettled, and there's nothing really progressing, then, you know, alarm bells will start to ring. You'd need to put your hand in then and make sure. And, you know, as I always say, when you see 2 feet coming up, that's, you know, 90% of the time when a cow can get a calf up that far, she'll go on and push him out, because, you know, he's not that overly big when he's got up that far, and she should go on.
In terms of calf hitting the ground, right, you can take us through what you do with navels, but pay particular attention to colostrum and how you decide whether, I guess, if a cow calves out in this area and the calf is sucking, how do you decide that that calf has had enough colostrum, or when are you going in to intervene there with a stomach tube, or maybe helping that calf to suck? What are you using there?
Yeah, look, colostrum is key. We're really trying to, I suppose, get 3 to 4 litres into the calf within the first 6 hours. But the way we generally work here on the farm is if a cow calves unassisted, then most of the time the calf will suck unassisted, and we try and let the calf go about that and do it himself. If the calf, we haven't physically seen him sucking, or if he's slow to get up, we'll go in, we'll put the cow in the head gate here, and we'll try and get the calf to suck. If the calf won't suck, then we'll milk the cow and we'll stomach tube him. And we also have, a rule on the farm here that if the cow is assisted at calving, then we automatically milk the cow and stomach tube the calf.
So then, in terms of iodine, is it iodine or is it chlorhexidine that's used on the farm here in terms of navel treatment?
Yeah, we've been using chlorhexidine. I don't think there's really much difference in either. Chlorhexidine's been working for us anyways.
And then take us on, I guess, then in terms of, right, so the calf is out here for 3 days or whatever it is. Maybe when the pressure's on, I guess it doesn't get staying in an individual pen for 3 days. But where do you go then, and how far is turnout away? I guess we've brilliant conditions here at the moment. Will you take a chance in 10 days' time if those conditions are still here and head out to grass, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, we're sort of a calf to grass system if we can at all. Look, if this weather continues for the next couple of weeks, I'll not be turning any calves out really before they're debudded. So we've got to wait for 10 days then, a week to 10 days to debud them and give their first vaccine. If the weather's still good, they'll be going straight out the door.
Just tell us that, I suppose, in terms of vaccinations, you're vaccinating here for pneumonia and you're vaccinating for black leg. When is that completed? Is it at dehorning or is it at a later stage, that start of vaccination?
Yeah, the calves get their first vaccination against pneumonia and PA3 virus when they're being debudded, so that's around 7 to 10 days. And then a month later, they'll get their second, their booster shot for pneumonia, and they'll get their first IBR. And then 2 to 3 weeks after that, then they get their first shot for black leg, and then they'll get their booster then a month later.
So in terms of, I suppose, just to recap, in terms of looking into Calving 2022, is there anything you're going to change this year from last year? Anything you want to tweak, or I suppose advice for farmers out there heading into Calving 2022? What's important from your point of view here on Tullamore Farm?
Look, I suppose maybe last year we seen that maybe our mortality rate was up, and we couldn't put our finger on that as to why. It was maybe if it was one thing you could say, okay, there's something wrong there, we need to change it. But we're, I suppose, continuing on, as we have in previous years. My biggest advice to farmers around calving time is, colostrum into calves. That's number one. You have to be getting colostrum into calves, and and to have good quality colostrum as well. And if that means feeding a bit of soya or something before the calve to ensure that cows are springing up a good colostrum. Colostrum is key, and calves have to be calving down in a clean environment. You can do what you like after that with vaccines and navel treatments, but if colostrum isn't going in and calves aren't being born in a clean environment, you're going to run into trouble.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Okay, guys, all seems to be back on track. We had a bit of a technical glitch there while that video was playing, and thanks to the team in Traction for sorting that out for me. Adam, Sean, plenty happening down there in Tullamore. I suppose maybe more of a commercial feel to that video than maybe, and you haven't got some of the luxuries that the guys have over in Gurteen. But again, the basic principles, the same once again of what we hear in terms of good hygiene, good colostrum. Sean, how important, or how much emphasis do you put on feeding the cow from when she's dried off, e.g. at weaning through to calving? How important is that in terms of having a successful calving season?
Yeah, look, it's one of the most important factors, and I suppose we talk about, maybe feeding cows in 3 or 4 weeks up to calving with soya and different things, but I'd be more inclined to say that, body condition, having cows in the right order is probably way more important than what we were doing in the last, 2 weeks in terms of trying to get protein into cows, because if cows are not in the right condition, be it too thin or too fat, you're going to have more assisted calvings. And when you have more assisted calvings, you're going to have calves that won't suck, you're going to have calves that are going to get sick. So body condition is key, and getting those fatter cows pulled back a bit, not too much now, and get the thinner cows up. like as we, it's an old saying, and it's a true one. You know, we need cows fit, not fat at calving.
Guys, I have a question in here from John and Claire. If it turns out to be a long, wet spring, what advice would you give for keeping cows and calves healthy indoors for a month or so after calving, that you don't get out to grass right away?
I'd say, look, we've talked about it already, Justin, in terms of straw and that creep area. Really don't skimp on straw. I know straw is expensive, and look at over the west here, it's probably 25, 30 euros by the time it's landed over here. But geez, it really does pay to keep those calves in a good bed. And if calves are laying on concrete or laying on slats, it's really not good, and they're going to get cold and they're going to get sick. And I'd say as well, look, at silage quality isn't as good as it should be on a lot of dry stock farms. And in terms of keeping those cows milking, if they're in for a prolonged period, you're going to have to go in there with meal into that cow to keep the energy up, and I guess keep the milk yield up, and maybe even a little bit of creep for that calf as well at the back of the creep. I'd definitely be looking after things that way. But it's do the simple things well again, and make sure, look at straw, absolute number one there.
Aidan, I remember being down in Moor Park and seeing some of the research work that was going on around outdoor calf rearing, and it was working quite successfully. Are there many farmers doing that now, or is that gone by the wayside, or how successful is that?
No, Jack or Justin, there's still a good few doing it, but it's not a February job, you know. It's really it's March or middle of March after St. Patrick's Day, if anything. When the calves are stronger, as much as the weather being better, to be honest. And you have to have shelter for them as well. So it's not as though you just put them out to any field. Either you have to have, you know, man-made shelters, or else a good natural shelter. But really, they usually have those kind of lean-to type little shelters, and they put bedding and straw and wood chip and stuff into them, so they have a dry lie. But sure, look, I mean, like, they're not ideal, you have to say, Justin. You know, ideally, I suppose a shed would probably be better for younger calves, if weather gets difficult, because, you know, sure, we could get very bad weather at any time of the year now. So yeah, I'd say most farmers that are doing it are either thinking of building a shed or have built a shed.
Donald, it's amazing how hardy a calf can get if it gets a week or 10 days out. Even if it did come wet weather, okay, you might do a little bit of damage, but it's sometimes nearly worse bringing those cows back into a hot, stuffy shed. Like it's about getting that balance right, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, I suppose that's what it's all about, is getting the balance right, but often easier said than done. And yeah, letting the calves out is great. If you do have to bring them back in, if you don't have a big enough shed, is where a lot of farms are going to get stuck if they were intending getting out a month before they can. Oftentimes you have maybe 70-80% of your cows calved, and you thought you were going to have 50% of them out. That can be a problem. But maybe a compromise is, we've all talked about this, separating cows from calves, particularly on suckler farms, that you can get a double benefit from that, and maybe let the calves creep out the back of the shed to a paddock before you let the cows and calves out all together. You know, it's going to be a lot better for the health of the calves. Get them out in fresh air, get them starting picking at a bit of grass, and it's going to massively help your fertility in the suckler cow for the next season.
Yeah, in that it'll break that bond, Donald, between the cow and the calf, and bring her back in heat quicker. Isn't that the theory behind that one?
Absolutely, and that's hugely important in getting suckler cows back in calf again.
What do you do, Sean, when it comes wet down in Tullamore? Because you have also the traffic jam of sheep coming on into the system as well, and lambing starting to get going.
Yeah, look, we have, I suppose, a sort of a creep area, and, you know, we are constructing a shed at the minute with a lie back on it, which would be a massive help. But, you know, what I'd be saying maybe to a lot of farmers is, and a lot of beef farmers don't have maybe the luxuries of great creep areas, that, you know, a dirty paddock is a lot better than a dirty creep area for calves. And if that means you have to sacrifice maybe a small paddock, or even if you put 2 and 3 cows in each paddock, maybe in 5 or 6 different paddocks around the farm, if you have to, you know, that's if you don't have, you know, good creep and plenty of straw. If you're bringing calves back in or keeping them in, as Adam says, look, you have to be going heavy with the straw. If you're not, my advice would be to be better off somewhere out and poaching a paddock if you have to.
Guys, any tips or advice for calving suckler cows this spring in the same shed as a calf that had crypto last year? That doesn't sound like a great recipe.
No, but let's be honest, a lot of farmers have to deal with it. Like, you know, it's a very real problem. You want to clean the shed as well as you can. And unfortunately, with crypto, cleaning the shed means power washing with a steam cleaner, hot water and disinfectant, and getting it to the stage that the floor and the underneath of the bars or the gates and everything are spotlessly clean, which isn't easy. That's the first thing I do. And then the next thing I would think about is carriers can be a significant, or cows can be a significant carrier of crypto as well. So you'd want to make sure that the cow's hide and coat is as clean as possible coming up to calving. So again, like the lads have been saying all evening, plenty of fresh straw to get those cows clean coming up to calving is about the most important thing you can do.
What about going in there with a treatment, Donal? Is that a no-no now, or you hear that, you know, that 7-day treatment in terms of halic cures? Is that still, you know, in terms of whether there has been issues on farms?
Yeah, well, like I wouldn't be recommending that unless there has been issues. If there is issues, look, you know, it depends on the size of the issues you have on farm. Whether you go in recommending it as a blanket preventative treatment, and in some cases we do have to do that. But look, it's expensive, which is a problem. I'm going to guess it's somewhere around €7 a cow or somewhere of that order, or €7 a calf to treat them. But the bigger difficulty is on a suckler farm in particular. How do you give an oral product to a suckler calf every day for 7 days? If you have, like Sean there, maybe 100 cows, and he's going to try and get some of them out maybe on some farms. And I know Sean was saying about the debudding, but he's going to try and get some of them out, and he's going to have some of them in big pens, maybe with half a dozen cows in them, and you're going in trying to dose cows in oil product. That's a big labour issue. So I think prevention in this case is definitely far better than cure. So by prevention, I mean they're not using a product, hygiene of both the shed and the cows, and plenty of colostrum into them.
Guys, does feeding hay, straw, oats, etc. in the weeks before calving have any impact in reducing calving difficulty? Who wants to grab that?
The area side, Justin, you know, it goes back to what I think Sean was saying about condition score. So if your cows are at the appropriate condition score, which is 3.25, you know, there's no need for any other feeds. If your cows are over that condition score, the likes of hay and straw are lower quality than silage, so that actually reduce the condition score of the cows. They should be underfed in that case, which will help their calving. But equally, the meal is probably only a runner if your cows are under the 3.25 or substantially under 3.25. So it's all to do with condition score. I don't subscribe to the view that you should be feeding them just to improve calving ease, because there's no evidence of that unless the cows are the thinner fat.
And it's the very same on the suckler side, Justin. It's condition score. It's all about condition score.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Woods and Aidan Brennan have actually agreed on something. It's seldom occurrence, but what's seldom is what's rare is wonderful, they say. Ladies and gentlemen, do get your questions in. We're going to our last section this evening, and we do want to try and answer as many of your questions as possible. Email us at webinar@farmersjournal.ie or WhatsApp us on 086 836 6465. So we're now going to head back down to Tullamore, where Adam caught up with Donal, actually down on the farm earlier this week. But before we do, actually, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in 60 seconds. Or we can go to Tullamore Farm and take our break after, guys, if that works.
Okay, I'm here with Donal Lynch, Tullamore Farm vet, and we're here on Tullamore Farm in the calving shed. Last days of January, Donal, we've two cows calved here behind us, as if by design. I suppose it's really getting busy here now in terms of cows here in front of us, in for calving. I suppose in that build-up period, like a lot of farmers out there maybe won't be building up until maybe 3 or 4 weeks, maybe calving in March. Important things in the next month. Just give me a couple of tips for farmers in the next month to look at.
I suppose the big thing, like I was saying to you earlier on, Adam, to be prepared is hugely important. So what do we need to do to be prepared? I'd say number one, you want the cows in the right condition. Okay, so you want the cows not fat, not thin. So body condition score 3, that's going to allow them to produce the colostrum they need for the calf, but it's also going to allow that calf fit out easily, and it's not going to have the calf very big to get out. So that's number one. Number two, you need the cows clean. All the diseases we get to do with scouring calves all basically come from cow dung. So where does the cow dung come from? It comes from the cow. And like if you look at the cows over the winter when they're on slats, let's face it, they get dirty, that's life. We want to try and get them cleaned up as much as we can before calving. So how do you do that? Clip their tails and clip their backs helps. Tails hugely important, backs less so. But like if you have a dirty tail with lots of hair on it that collects cow dung, well, every time she swishes it around, she's going to get on her sides and she's going to get on her bag. That'll help. Make sure the cows are dosed for fluke and worms if they need to be. You want to make the dung more solid rather than more scoury. I suppose then after that you're going to look and think about how you bed them coming up to calving. So they're generally speaking living on slats. As we get close to calving, we want to ideally move them onto straw. Straw is expensive. Look maybe at other options of what you can do. And here you're going to try the sawdust this year. That'll dry up the dirt that's on the cow's coat and hopefully it'll fall off. That'll help. What else do you need to be thinking about? Vaccination. A lot of farmers nowadays, especially bigger farmers, are vaccinating against scour. So you give the cow a vaccine between 3 weeks and 3 months before she calves, and that's going to increase the number of antibodies against the common causes of scour that we get in calves.
If scour hasn't been an issue on the past on that farm, is it still worth going in there? What is it, 10, 12 euros a head? Is it still worth going in there with that?
Look, the price for it has come down a little bit, but you could say round figures, 10 euros a head. Is it worth it? Kind of like insurance. So I do it on my own suckler cows. I don't really have a problem, but I don't have the time to be trying to feed calves to get a scour. So I do it. Is it necessary on a farm that doesn't have a problem? No, it's not. Of course it's not. If you don't have a problem, well, necessarily you don't have to go and fix it. I think most big farms are doing it nowadays because it's quite difficult to manage here when you have up on 100 cows calving. It's very difficult to manage to keep everything clean and everything going according to plan and make sure every calf gets the right amount of the right type of colostrum. Very easy to say that on paper. Not so easy to do it when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you've been up all night for the last 3 nights. So I think the vaccine does help us with that. And certainly if you have had a problem in the past, I'd say the vaccine is essential.
In an ideal world, I guess a cow will calve her own, calf will get up and suck, get loads of colostrum, and you let them out to the field and happy days. Unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world. And I guess that's where vets come in. But in terms of even making that decision beforehand, even before we get to the vet, where do you make that decision as regards intervening or even going in to upset a cow to handle her in terms of upsetting maybe the calving process? Where do you call that?
So we divide calving into 3 things. First, second and third stage labour. First stage is getting ready. Second stage is having the calf. Third stage is passing the cleanings. So what we're worried about in that context is first stage, when she's getting ready, more so than anything else. So ideally you want your calf moved to where she's going to calve before first stage starts. So you come home from work in the evening if you're part-time, you arrive home, you look at your cow and say, God, I think she might calve tonight. You move her out of the big pen and you put her into a pen like this on her own. And ideally you have another cow beside her so she's a bit of company and settled. Then you go home, you have a camera here, you go home, you watch on the camera and you don't go near her unless there's a problem. If she's not disturbed, she's much more likely to calve naturally, clean naturally, the calf will get up and suck a lot better. That's easy to say, but sometimes you have to intervene. So what are the points I would say that you as a farmer need to think about intervening? One, you're going to be much more conscious if you're expecting a problem. So if you have a lot of cows and calved to the same bull and you've had trouble with the first 5 or 6 calved, well then you're going to intervene a lot earlier on the next ones. That goes without saying. If you have a heifer maybe that's in calf that shouldn't have been in calf, you're going to intervene earlier. But let's say you're not expecting problems. You're going to watch that cow for 2 hours after she starts the first sign of calving. So the first bit of cleanings or fluids or foot you see. I'd be happy to watch her for 2 hours. If she's not making progress then, I'm going to investigate as a farmer. If I'm not happy with what I find, I'll call the vet. But that's a reasonable time to leave her.
The big pull, I guess, in terms of going in there, intervening, you have a big calf, we'll say, look, you get him out alive, but he maybe can't get up, or there's a bit of an issue there, sucking, or there's a big tongue. What's the best route of, I guess, a treatment there, or what's the first thing a farmer should do in that situation? Is it a red light? Is it a jacket? Is it a painkiller? Is it an antibiotic? What do we need to do first?
All of the above except the antibiotic. Okay, so everything you said there, hugely important. But let's narrow it down. Heat is important, okay? So how do you manage heat? First thing is well-bedded and clean, dry straw is going to keep them nice and warm. get colostrum into him. So 8% of his body weight. So typically the type of calf you're talking about, a
60
big
kilos
calf,
maybe, yeah.
you're going to be talking about, what's 8% of that? Something like 3 litres, a little
Yeah.
over 3 litres. Ideally get him to suck a teat or suck the cow, ideally, if not stomach tubal. Okay? After that, does he need a painkiller? There's quite likely he does need a painkiller. Like, imagine you were pulled by your 2 arms and pulled out of a barrel. It's going to be sore enough. So a painkiller would be advisable. But I would say in that case, you need to talk to your vet. Certain painkillers aren't suitable for calves, and the dose is hugely important. So if you give a cow a meal too much, that's not going to make any difference. But if you give a calf a meal too much, that can be hugely significant. So I'd say make a plan with the type of painkillers you use if you need to, and talk to your own vet on that.
Is there a risk in terms of stomach tubing for a number of days in a row that milk isn't going into the right stomach, and there's issues there developing that calf by doing that?
Okay, so when a calf sucks a teat, there's a part of his stomach that a reflex closes into a groove and it bypasses the first stomach. So that colostrum goes into the stomach it should go into. Now, if he doesn't suck, that doesn't happen. So obviously if you put a tube down his neck, that doesn't happen. That's okay in the first few days, and that's kind of complicated to explain, but it's to do with the acid level in his stomach and how it digests milk. You can stomach tube a calf safely on day 1 and maybe up to day 3 or 4. There isn't a black and white cut-off. Yeah. I can't give you an exact time on when to stop stomach tubing milk. You can stomach tube fluids if a calf has scour, because those fluids are treated in a different way inside in the stomach. So yes, there is a risk, but not a risk at that stage. Now, the risk, of course, is when you're stomach tubing to make sure you do it right. You know, make sure the tube is in the right place. Once the tube is in the right place, there's a few other little things, but that's the main thing.
Naval treatment, what are we saying? We've both products here, but what are we saying in terms of?
I go chlorhexidine. So the paper's done on approved chlorhexidine works better. It's a better disinfectant. But that being said, chlorhexidine can often be difficult to get. So iodine is the next best thing. So I'd be happy with either a spray or a dip. Say hugely important. Put it on as soon as you can after calving, remembering to be careful going into a freshly calved cow, but put it on as soon as you can after calving. Important.
Encouraging that calf to suck, I suppose. We've all been there trying to get any tips or advice or little old wives' tales maybe in terms of getting those calves to suck. Honey or...
Yeah, there's loads of things. Best thing is get that cow to calve on her own and stay away from her. That's the best of all. But obviously your bigger, beefier calves are going to be much slower about calving, okay? They're going to be a lot harder to get up and sucking. What can you do? Energy. So there is several products you can buy. Like you can buy tubes which are largely based around caffeine type products, and what they do is they stimulate the calf, liven him up, he's more likely to get up and suck.
No immunity from those products, it's just purely an energy source, is it?
There might be some limited, I suppose it's not scientific exactly, there might be some limited benefits to immunity, but the big thing is you get them up and sucking quicker.
Yeah.
Look, what works very well in lambs, not so well in calves, is a piece of chocolate in their tongue. Works very well on lambs to get them up and sucking and going. Heating up the calf. If he's wet, let's say you don't know he's calving, and let's say unfortunately he calves in the slats or something like that, get him out, get him dried up, get him warm, put him under a red lamp for a while. That'll make a big difference. After that, look, as vets we do have some injections we can use to try and get them to suck. I'm not going to say they're a perfect solution. They work well in some cases, they don't work at all in other cases, but they're certainly not a solution you'd be using on every calf by any means. It's for very small numbers of calves. You'd be going down that route.
Okay, Donald, thanks very much for joining us here today. Hopefully we won't see you again in this calving shed for a number of weeks, but I know you're available all the time, and in fairness, if we ring the phone here, you're down the road. So look at and we're not afraid to ring the vet here in terms of assistance either. So look, thanks very much for joining us.
And just say thanks, Adam, for that. But what I would say to every farmer, look, if you do have problems, do ring the vet, ask for a bit of advice. Like, you know, sometimes the lads here would ring me, and I might be able to give them a bit of advice over the phone. It mightn't even involve a call out, but it can be hugely helpful.
Thank you.
Well, Sean, the burning question there is, you ring for advice, do you always take it?
That's the beauty of advice. You can always ask for it, but you don't have to take it.
But I do think that vet-farmer relationship, guys, is very important, in that Donald comes onto the farm and he knows the score. He probably knows, Sean, your level of competence in terms of calving a cow, and he has a fair idea that if you're calling him it's not a straightforward job that he's coming to as well, and he knows obviously the disease history in the farm as well.
Yeah, you know, and I'd say me and Donald talk on the phone a lot more than we actually see each other over the course of the year, and especially over the calving season. You know, and Donald's welcome to call in and check in. Sometimes he would, just to see how things are going on the farm. And that's an important relationship to have with your vet. And as you say, when I pick up the phone and Donald hears me ringing for a cow calving, he's nearly 100% sure before he comes it's probably going to be cesarean. So, but it's just to build up the relationship with your vet, and you'll find most vets are willing to, I suppose, just give you advice rather than maybe come out in the middle of the night.
Guys, I have a few practical calving questions here. At what point should you introduce the calving, Jack? And I suppose, Donald, that's a tricky one to answer. But have you any tips there on that one?
Sure. There isn't a straight answer to that. And like you said, about how I know Sean's competence, and that'd be the same with a lot of farmers I go to. And, oftentimes it's about help, and it depends on the time, and depends on the cow and the history. I suppose, where do you use the jack? You use the jack when the calf will come out but needs help that you're not able to give physically yourself without a jack. I don't have a better answer than that. Sometimes if people ask me, how do I know whether to pull that calf or do a section? I don't have something I can measure. I can't measure the cow's foot and measure the cow's pelvis and say, this will fit out and this won't. It comes from experience, and that's both as a vet and as a farmer. And there's several things we do. And even as you're walking towards a cow, you're making decisions in your head without even knowing. You're making decisions before you go near that cow as a farmer. So I think everybody knows themselves when they need to seek help. Some people, no difference that if you're lifting a weight, some people need help before another lad, because one lad might be able to lift 50 kilos, one lad might be able to lift 70 kilos. So it's going to vary.
I think, Donald, the real thing about the jack is to treat it with a bit of respect. Like, it can put a lot of pressure on the cow, and you hear guys looking at jacks with bars bent and whatnot. If you're bending the bar of a jack, well, really, you might not be the right man to be in control of it.
Well, a jack, they say, is the same strength as 10 men. Okay, so you certainly can do a lot of harm with it, and absolutely, like you shouldn't. If you are bending a jack, you're in trouble.
Adam Wood says it's 5 of him, so that's probably about right. So it is. We're still going here, guys. I'll keep the quick fire round going. What signs should you look out for in a cow with possible milk fever?
I suppose the obvious one is she's down and can't stand up. But before that, you're looking for things like she's staggering or difficulty getting up. That's what you'd be aiming to get her at that stage. And if you get her at that stage, oftentimes a bottle of calcium under the skin or a calcium bolus will solve the problem. I would always say to farmers, if she is down, she needs calcium into the vein. Some farmers can do that themselves. Others, but I would say she does need it into the vein. If you give cows calcium under the skin till they're down, they have less chance of getting up, even if you come back later on to give them calcium into the vein.
Okay, and guys, I've a question here. Hi lads, I had a cow with a strong red colour in her colostrum. Is it poor quality or what's going on here? I don't have a name for that one.
Difficult to answer that conclusively without seeing it. Cows that have a lot of springing will not uncommonly burst blood vessels in the bag, and that would create the red colour. That probably no harm, maybe not the right taste a calf mightn't suck, but it also can be a sign of mastitis. So you're going to look at that as how the cow is. If there's any sign the cow being clinically sick, that's hugely significant. If there isn't, on balance, it probably is more likely to be a burst blood vessel.
Young farmer from Offaly here, guys. How would you knock a cow on her side safely that's having a hard calving to change her position so the calf might adjust the position and hopefully pop out?
I think there's a simple answer to that. You wouldn't do it simply. It'll depend on the cow. Like, look, as vets, we certainly have means of doing it. We would have sedative options that will contribute to it safely. I don't think would you
rather keep the cow standing there? If you were calving, would you not be better with her standing nearly, and as opposed to, would you not have more manoeuvring ability if she was standing than when she was lying?
I think it'll depend on that, Adam. I personally wouldn't change it. So if she's standing, I'd calve her happily standing. If she's down, well, obviously you can't make her stand up. I don't think it's feasible to be trying to get a cow to lie down that doesn't want to lie down.
Adam, I have here a request more than anything. Can you run through your calf vaccination program, or better still, put it up online over the next few days, because it'd be great to see it. So that's going to be something you'll follow up on. I have a few cows a month out from calving, and they're a little bit thinner than I would like. What is the best thing to do now? Feed concentrates or leave on silage only? So we'll assume they're 68 weeks out from calving at this stage, guys.
Yeah, you're probably getting, you're still okay maybe in terms. I'd be going with oats, maybe, and a little bit of cider then coming up pre-calving, or maybe a little bit of oats and giving them the best quality silage that you could maybe on the farm, in terms of changing them from the medium stuff maybe to the good stuff if you had it. But it's probably, I'd say it's a little bit of oats maybe and a little bit of meal, maybe not too much. I'd be afraid maybe of blowing up a calf on them, but just to try and improve condition a wee bit.
Just in Paddy and Sligo, guys, feeding pre-calving nuts to allow to all cows, regardless of condition, is there any benefit?
I do that personally on my own cows.
You get the magnesium, Donald, is it? Or
I suppose it's everything. Like, so it's all the minerals, but probably to control milk fever. I don't really see milk fever as a problem in suckler cows as clinical milk fever, but I would certainly say since I started doing that, they calved better. I think it's also important to point out there's a significant difference in beef and dairy cows. So a dairy cow, typically the calf that's inside her is a smaller percentage of her body weight, whereas obviously with suckler cows we're trying to produce a bigger calf, and when you have a bigger calf inside in a cow, it squeezes the stomach. She can't eat as much, so energy availability becomes a problem when that cow goes to calve. So I think that's another important reason for feeding the meal. As you get very close to calving, a cow physically can't consume enough silage to get the energy she needs to calve, whereas the concentrates are a more dense form of energy. So that's where they fit in.
Aidan, you must be a gas sitting here, all this money being spent feeding meal and Red Bull into cows and all this stuff. Jesus, is this common practice on dairy farms?
No, I'm shocked by the whole thing. I know. Look, I mean, in fairness, there are more dairy farmers looking at the meal option, particularly to get the minerals in, but particularly for the close-up cows, because you're guaranteeing. So these cows are going to calve in the next 5 to 10 days, because they're guaranteeing that if they're all going to come to the feed face, if you're giving them a kilo of meal with minerals in it, or calcium magnesite, or magnesium flakes, or whatever you're putting in with it as well, because if you're sprinkling over the silage, there's a chance those cows mightn't get it. They might get it tomorrow, they mightn't get it today. So it's important from that point of view. But look, I mean, cheap and cheerful does me. I mean, I think Donald made a good point in the size of the calf and the relative importance within the body. So like, it's we generally don't feed concentrate to dry cows. We generally don't. We go with the ordinary off the shelf. Well, we feed good quality mineral spec depending on what the herd needs, but we don't go for fancy soya hulls or soya bean meal or anything like that. But we don't have problems generally. But it's depends on the situation.
Guys, before we wrap up, I just want to maybe have a quick update on the new animal remedy regulations, animal medicine regulations, what it means for vets and farmers. Donald, maybe you could give us a vet's perspective on that. I hope that wasn't some farmer had a cow calving now, Donald. That's not a good look.
No, it's not a cow calving anyway. Look, the question you're asking, Justin, is kind of difficult to answer. At this stage, there's an awful lot we don't know about what's going to change. My opinion on it is there'll be very little change for what the bona fide vets and farmers are doing around the country, providing medicines that's needed to cows to prevent disease and then treat disease as it occurs. So I think there'll be very limited changes in that respect. But look, as you're aware there, the regulations that were to come in have been delayed until June. So it's going to be several months before we know what's going to happen. There is going to be some IT work done by the department to facilitate the prescriptions and the paperwork side of it. But as vets, we haven't seen that yet, and we're not fully sure how it will work. But I think the availability of medicines in the vast majority of cases isn't going to change dramatically. We are all going to work towards reducing the use of critically important antibiotics, which the majority of us have been doing for the last good number of years anyway. But maybe another thing just to be aware of and concerned about is, and you talked to Phelan there about Brexit earlier on. Since Brexit happened, there has been quite an issue with availability of products that would be quite important to us as vets and farmers. And I think maybe that's something that we need to address and try and do something about it, and at least be aware of the potential problems coming down the road in that context.
Okay, Donal, look, thank you very much for your contribution tonight, and indeed for your ongoing support in on the farm in Tullamore. I know the guys take real comfort in it. There's a huge value to us, and that relationship with you and your team is a very important relationship with the team on Tullamore Farm, in terms of that level of trust and knowledge that's shared across the farm. So thank you for that. Adam and Aidan, just before I let you go, what's in the paper tomorrow? Obviously an action-packed journal coming out tomorrow morning. What have you got for us, Aidan?
So I have a report on a dairy farm in Cork, Owen Ashton, young farmer of the year for 2021, managing 180 cows in Cork. So it's a kind of a spring farmer focus.
And obviously, in the big talking point and from the dairy side on the news front is this new dairy group set up to, I suppose, put a brake on dairy emissions initially and then reduce emissions. How do you see that playing out? Is that creating much concern?
Yeah, so next Monday, Jack or Justin, will be the first meeting that this group is going to have. Very worrying for dairy farmers, I'd have to say. All the indications are pointing towards the fact that there's a new quota going to be introduced just a couple of years after quotas being removed. So yeah, I mean, look, it remains to be seen what conclusions this working group is going to come up with. But any farmer, or young farmer, or beef farmer, or sheep farmer, or silage farmer, or a young dairy farmer even thinking of expanding is going to have second thoughts at the moment, and it's a very worrying trend, you'd have to say.
It's going to be very worrying for guys on a growth trend, Aidan, that have made capital investment, have based their borrowings on reaching a number of cows. And I know the minister, in fairness to him, has stressed that that's going to be allowed to continue, that new entrants are going to be allowed to continue. But he's trying to put a square peg into a round hole if he's talking about stabilising emissions, because we already know there's a letter in the post that's going to increase cow numbers by a further 200,000 by 2025 based on breeding decisions farmers have already made. So trying to accommodate new entrants, future growth and expansion, take into account that there's 200,000 cows already in the pipeline and stable emissions, it seems a tall ask.
Yeah, and that's before you even look at where our emission ceilings are currently, and a lot of the budget the carbon budget that was introduced before back in the autumn was based on 2018 levels. And so we know we've had probably an 11 we've been growing at about 5 or 6% per year on top of that. So like it's there's cows in the ground already that are now in jeopardy in terms of their long-term future, even though the minister has said that those with growth plans can pursue them. But you're dead right. Like, I mean, we just need clarity on this straight away. It's up to the farm organizations. Our dairy co-ops are involved in this working group. Are they going to what's going to come of this? And we need clarity quickly, I would say.
Adam, what's happening in the beef and suckler world?
Yeah, we've got Kieran Mealy has a lovely piece tomorrow on calving the cow. I guess just what we talked about tonight in terms of difficult calvings and managing that difficult calving. We've also got a really packed fertilizer focus. Look at fertilizers on the tip of every farmer's tongue out there, and we've got some really good advice this week in terms of our focus on slurry and fertilizer application rates and what strategy farmers should take. And look, we've got the usual updates. Mark trade on fire, Justin. Calf trade starting off really positive, and beef improving a little bit as well. So it's pretty positive on the beef end at the moment.
You seem to have had an easy week yourself, Adam, did you?
Yeah, I was preparing for this, Justin. I was
okay. Aidan, you had to fill your pages and prepare for this at the same time. So we'll note that, Adam. We'll note that. But there's a lot long left in the year, Adam. There's another 50 odd journals for you to make up.
I'll make it up.
But it is, and Jack Kennedy has looked at fertilizer prices across Europe and actually globally, and looked at what it's costing per unit of nitrogen in other parts of the world, where Ireland ranks, and there's some interesting information on that, along with some details around and a nice article there on carbon sequestration and the amount of carbon locked up in soil has been probably twice as much as we envisaged that initial calculations assumed that it was. So lots of interesting material, and as Adam says, also we've got the market trends across all the various commodities, and again, also actually, whilst the commodity markets are obviously good for beef, dairy and lamb, the pig farmers are facing very real challenges at the minute, and we cover that, and we have an interesting letter in on that this week actually as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, plenty to get into tomorrow's Farmers Journal or online. So, look, other than that, I will draw tonight's session to a conclusion. Our next webinar takes place on Wednesday, the 16th of February, where we'll be talking about spreading slurry, getting maximum use out of slurry, and how to get maximum use out of your fertilizer application. Obviously, a hot topic with where prices are going at the minute. We hope you can join us for that. Many thanks to all our guests, and a note that Adam actually gave me earlier. He actually says, and a special thanks to Adam because he has done a great job. So we all know exactly where Adam's ego is and all of this. But on a serious note, thanks to Aidan, thanks to Sean, thanks to Donal, thanks to the team in Traction, and my own colleague Clodagh behind the scenes that makes all this happen and function, guys. And thanks to you for joining in tonight. We've had over 500 join us tonight for this webinar, and thanks to Chanelle Animal Health and AXA Insurance for their ongoing support for our series. Guys, thanks very much. Until the 16th, stay safe, and remember, guys, you're the most important asset on the farm during the calving season. Look after yourself and always think farm safety. Thanks very much.